Good morning, this is Rob from GRAF, and this week's podcast is going to be focused on Africa again, and it's going to be talking about Africa's disconnect from the wider global economy. So I've titled it The Globalisation Gap. What's that all about? Well, the 3% problem, that's how I've titled it. What is the 3% problem? Well, Africa accounts for less than 3% of global trade, less than 3% of the world's commercial activity. It also extends to internet traffic. In 2007, Google measured the amount of internet traffic around the world, and Africa was stuck at less than 3%. Electricity generation is way behind the rest of the world. Insurance premiums, less than 3% of all insurance premiums are written in Africa, and the majority of those are in South Africa. Mobile broadband is lacking, along with conventional landline broadband. And market capitalization of all listed companies, less than 3% of those are African-based companies. These little graphics here show internet use in Africa, and the light green color in the bottom right-hand side on the first slide is Africa. It has moved up a bit when we come to 2016, but it's still way behind the rest of the world. Transport infrastructure, it's one of the major Achilles heels in Africa. Anyone that's traveled in Africa knows what it's like. You end up having to fly between the countries and capital cities because road infrastructure, once you get off the tarmac road, which is generally only the main roads between the major cities, you end up in dirt roads, which in the wet season are virtually impassable. Africa only has one port in the top 100 in the world, and that's Durban. Inter-country trade in Africa is only 12% of trade. Most African trade is the export of raw materials. 70% of all African exports are raw materials. They don't do any processing in the country, and there are reasons for that. Rail transport is absolutely terrible as well, and this all adds up to making the export of a container from Africa costing twice as much as Latin America. So even if you were able to process stuff economically in Africa, the export costs, the cost of getting that container load of goods to the port would be astronomical and make it uncompetitive. Electricity, I've already mentioned. There is less electricity generated in all sub-Saharan Africa than there is in the country of Spain in Europe. Only 32% of South African households have access to reliable electricity supplies. And the cost is 3.5 times the cost of electricity in North America. And that is one of the reasons for the issue with very little manufacturing and processing in Africa. It's the electricity cost, because the electricity cost of manufacturing and processing in Africa can add up to 40% of the total cost of the goods. That's opposed to 14% in many of the other manufacturing countries in the world. So this makes processing and manufacturing in Africa a very, very difficult proposition. And it's why less than 3% of the global apparel industry is based in Africa. So why is this disconnect between Africa and the rest of the world? Why does this figure of 3% keep cropping up? 3% of insurance premiums, 3% of electricity supplies, less than 3% of world trade. When it comes to banking and investment, less than 3% of the world's private equity is invested in Africa. The market capitalization of all African countries is less than 3% of the world's total. Well, that's down to Africa's historic disconnect from the rest of the world. It's to do with the Cold War. It's to do with colonialism. That's something I perhaps will try and cover in another video. That's a bit of a minefield, but we'll give a brief history, and I'm sure lots of people will want to comment on that. Anyone want to comment on this 3% figure and Africa's disconnect from the wider world economy and how it's hindering Africa's development? Please place a message below or drop me a private message. Thanks for now.